the facts are the facts, the texts are the texts, and I think that the evidence will be clear.
That Ventura had a choice and that she chose to participate in those sexual encounters.
Where she is entertaining other people in the bedroom. He enjoyed having the freak-offs.
She's being asked specifically about the drug use.
She is clearly excited about freak-off.
Did you watch the Diddy trial? When prosecutors showed the music mogul's text chats with his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, he lost all control of the courtroom. Not just any messages, though. They included proof that went straight against what Diddy has been saying for months. The judge had to issue an injunction while Diddy's attorneys rushed to limit the harm. That was only the start of day 4.
Cassie Ventura on the witness stand for a 4th day in the federal criminal trial against hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs. The defense continuing cross-examination this morning, confronting her with dozens of her own messages, many explicit, hoping to convince the jury she was an eager sexual partner who matched Combs' desires. "I'm always ready to freak off," one message said.
She was into the freak-offs herself and was like a willing participant and was into all the freaky stuff, and essentially that was the crux of what they were trying to do yesterday.
And do you think they proved that or not?
I mean, there's texts like that from 2009, "I'm always ready to freak off." There was some other texts where she was referencing like hitting him up about the FOs, is what they were referring to him. To me, like, yes, this doesn't look good, but at the same time, I think the timeline is crucial here. And these are texts from 2009, man. That was when they were first getting in the relationship. She was young. Obviously, they were in the honeymoon stage, and she was stoked to like, oh my God, I'm with Diddy. I'm living this lavish lifestyle. Of course, she's going to be saying things that she knows will curry favor with him to keep it going.
And like any other day, the 4th day of the Diddy trial began. There were only the customary hushed murmurs and the odd shuffle of papers in the courtroom. At the defense table, Diddy sat composedly in his fitted suit, occasionally bending to murmur to his lawyers. Nothing appeared unusual. The majority of those in the room were merely getting settled for another day of intricate legal arguments while the court worked through procedural problems. Then everything abruptly changed. The prosecutor rose and declared they had information. They wanted to show the court, but initially, no one gave it much attention until they brought up Diddy and Cassie's previously undisclosed text exchanges. Everyone in the room moved forward in their chairs. The prosecutor's arrival with a folder filled with printouts caused the atmosphere in the courtroom to change. Diddy's response was instantaneous and intense. One courtroom reporter claimed that his eyes enlarged and that his face suddenly lost its color. There was a noticeable shift in his respiration. Fast, shallow breaths that had his shoulders that quickly rise and fall. His palms, which had been resting peacefully on the table, suddenly clamped down so firmly that his knuckles turned white. One seasoned courtroom writer commented, "I've covered celebrity trials for 15 years, and I've never seen someone lose their composure so completely. In public, he has always been the epitome of calm and composure." Diddy abruptly pushed back his chair and got to his feet, as the prosecutor started to go over the contents of the texts. Diddy made 2 steps toward the judge's bench after shaking off his lawyer's attempt to hold his arm. At that point, everything started to incredibly disorganized. Immediately, 2 of his lawyers leapt to his defense, one of them forcibly separating Diddy from the bench. Calling for order, the judge repeatedly hammered his gavel. As the court officers approached the defense table, Diddy was muttering something that the front row could hear but not clearly make out. It was reported by a witness in the gallery as irate muttering that grew louder with each phrase. He needed to be physically led back to his seat by his lead attorney, who placed a hand on his shoulder and said loudly in his ear, the judge made a call for a 15-minute break, but the harm had already been done. Already, reporters were tapping away quickly on their phones. The music mogul, who is usually unflappable, had just lost control, in front of everyone. It wasn't only that this outburst occurred that was shocking, it was the moment. Even though the book hadn't been read aloud yet, this reaction was triggered simply by the suggestion of their presence. It's obvious that whatever was in those messages touched someone. Diddy's lawyer asked for an almost 10-minute sidebar with the judge when the court resumed. Diddy's jaw remained fixed in his chair, clenched and unable to look at anyone. When the prosecution began, showing the first of the text messages on the courtroom screen, the tension in the room was so high that a knife could cut through it. everyone realized why Diddy had reacted so aggressively at that point. His and Cassie's secret discussions. We're about to reveal a side of their relationship that went against all he had been saying for months.
Ventura's attorney is optimistic outside of court.
Doing great. I said she was ready, and I think she's demonstrating that. The facts are the facts, the texts are the texts, and I think that the evidence will be clear as the case goes on and Cassie's testimony goes on, and we'll see what the jury does.
And finally, we'll talk about Justin Bieber because he is finally addressing the Diddy stuff. There's been long speculation that somehow he's involved.
Surprised it took so long to address.
Well, he's clearing that up now. And also we'll talk about how people are scared for Justin Bieber because they think he's in a cult. They have to have it.
By the end of today, Cassie will be done. So they have all day today to ask her whatever they want to ask her.
Because obviously she's about to pop. And that's like...
Which is totally understandable.
So if she did pop, if she did give birth, let's say the technical term, over the weekend, you know what would happen then, Devin?
I don't.
Mistrial, baby.
Why do you say that? What?
Because she's due back on the stand to give testimony. And if she can't give testimony anymore...
No, she's giving testimony today.
I know. I was saying, what if...
Oh, like she gave birth and then
that's why. That's the reason.
Delayed.
If she wasn't pregnant, I don't think the judge would have said you have to finish by today.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. Obviously. That's the whole, that's the whole crux of the argument.
Obviously.
Yeah.
You didn't explicitly, spell it out.
But Diddy's team is also pissed off because they're like, we want as much time as we can have.
Her voice is low at times. The defense did tell her if it's too much, I can read them, but there were many times early on this morning where she read some of those explicit details where she is clearly excited about a freak off and talks about entertaining other people in the bedroom.
And what has Diddy's demeanor been in this cross-examination as well?
There was a moment where Sean Combs was nodding in agreement when they brought up a message that he sent her where he said, one of my favorite times of the freak-offs is when we're able to make love after. And then she responds, that's the same for me. Now, what's interesting here is that does match what she told prosecutors or what she's been telling the jury all along, which is she did this and she said, but she really wanted to spend time with him after the fact. So he was shaking his head at this message where he's almost, I guess, agreeing that he did say, without him saying it, he enjoyed having the freak-offs and then having sex with her after the fact. And her saying, I agree with you, I love having sex with you after too.
By holding off on disclosing these texts until day 4, the prosecution was well aware of their tactics. Prior to releasing this bomb, they meticulously constructed their case, laying the groundwork with witnesses and evidence. The timing wasn't arbitrary. They wanted the jury to gain an understanding of Diddy and Cassie's connection before witnessing their unadulterated, uncensored conversation. Prosecutors presented the 3-year-old texts in chronological sequence. While the early exchanges appeared harmless enough, the tone significantly shifted as 2017 went on. Genuinely surprised, everyone was Diddy's phone. Said, "You think you can just walk away? Nobody walks away from me? I made you. I can break you just as fast." In a string of late-night texts from July 2018 that were sent hours after a public event where the couple seemed content and in love. The timestamp was 2:43 a.m., immediately following their return from a well-known awards ceremony. After a few minutes, Cassie replied, "Please stop threatening me. I'm afraid of what you'll do." His response was prompt. Ideally, you should be. In fact, there was a gasp in the courtroom when that exchange came up on the screen. One juror clearly shied away. Diddy's public persona as a loving partner was in direct opposition to his private threats, the prosecution pointed out in this discussion. In March 2019, a different set of texts revealed progressively more domineering conduct. At the party, "Who are you speaking to? I noticed that you were grinning at him." Diddy wrote, "Don't lie to me. I have people watching you everywhere. There's nowhere you can go that I won't know about," he said, when Cassie clarified that it was only a professional photographer she knew. Actually, what? The communication's flawless alignment with the events in their public timeline appeared to catch the jury off guard. 2 days after Diddy referred to Cassie as the love of my life in a highly publicized interview, he texted her saying, "This arrangement works because you do what I say." Don't overlook that. The prosecution carefully linked each group of communications to certain instances that Cassie's testimony referenced. They identified recurring themes in the discourse, such as threats, apologies, gifts, and then more domineering conduct. They called attention to Diddy's frequent usage of "you" and "nobody will believe you," for example. The most hurtful was perhaps a text Diddy sent in September 2018 that said, "I'm sorry about last night. I lost control. It won't happen again." The day following an incident, Cassie had previously detailed in her testimony, in which she said he physically assaulted her, she received this message. According to the last text made public, Diddy tried to keep Cassie quiet following their split. "Keep in mind our arrangement. You have been compensated for your quiet. Break it and there will be." Just weeks before he publicly characterized their breakup as cordial and respectful of one another, he sent this communication. These personal remarks presented an entirely different picture from Diddy's public declarations that he respected women and kept good ties with his ex-partners. There could not have been a more striking contrast between Diddy's meticulously manicured public persona and these unvarnished, unprocessed messages as the final text disappeared from the screen. All of the claims he had made for months had been refuted by his own comments.
The other things that the Diddy's team tried to do was show how they had breaks, and she was with Michael B. Jordan and was with Kid Cudi for a minute. But during that time period, she was still having freak-offs with Diddy, and I think that was them trying to show, this wasn't a controlling thing. Here she was, hooking up with other people. She just was into the freak-offs.
I kind of buy that, to be honest.
So...
she's out of the freak-offs then. She is... when she's with Kid Cudi, or allegedly with Michael B. Jordan, she's kind of out of the freak-offs if she wants to be. So why do you keep going back? Yeah. I know it's kind of like a mental, she still loves Diddy. Diddy was jealous about her.
Oh, yeah, because that was another thing that the prosecutors were trying to do, is show that, that they had a very jealous relationship. She would get jealous when he's with Kid Cudi. Also, Kim Porter, Cassie would be jealous of Kim Porter.
Right.
Trying to show that, Cassie, you were in love with this guy. That's why you were jealous.
Right.
So, this was a real relationship.
It was just interesting to see Chris Brown.
I mean, he's always coming up somewhere, dude.
He is.
Chris Brown.
All right, final story of the week. Final story of the week. Justin Bieber is not a victim of Diddy. So this was one of those rumors or whatever that was flying around in the months leading up to the trial. And to be honest, there was quite a few rumors flying around, was there minors involved? Says if no other celebrity was part of freak-offs, why are they in hiding? Are they in hiding though?
I don't think they're in hiding. I just think other celebrities didn't want to insert themselves. No one wants to be tied to Diddy one way or the other.
Even if you're at a white party, just having a lot of fun, one of Diddy's white parties, you don't want to be linked in any way.
No, and that's why all those people, there's a few people I think that have come forward and been I didn't see any of this freak off stuff.
Since Cassie filed her lawsuit, Diddy has repeatedly told the same tale, refuting all of the accusations, portraying their relationship as love and their separation as courteous and reciprocal. However, these text messages completely destroyed his entire story. In an interview with Entertainment Tonight just 3 months ago, Diddy claimed, "I have never and would never raise my hand to a woman. That's not how I was raised," while staring straight into the camera. He became tearful as he spoke about how much he still admired Cassie as a crucial aspect of my path. At the press conference his team held, his spokesperson asserted that Mr. Combs and Ms. Ventura maintained a respectful and healthy relationship both personally and professionally, following his lengthy Instagram statement in which he called her accusations utterly untrue and a desperate attempt to obtain money. They even dared to post those old pictures of them together that showed them having fun, implying Cassie was making it all up. The text messages, however, conveyed an entirely different narrative. They had a respectful conversation as Diddy was informing the Globe cooperation. He was sending her threats via private text. His messages were dictating her every action, even though he openly stated that he wished her the best. The inconsistency is, the prosecution made sure to emphasize this point. Diddy's private texts, which were occasionally delivered on the same day, and his public pronouncements were arranged in a terrible timeline on a giant display board. While one column displayed his interview in which he claimed mutual respect, the other had him messaging her, saying, "Nobody will believe you anyway." Lawyers observing the trial were taken aback by this tactic. One trial analyst outside the UN's courthouse stated that this type of clear disagreement destroys credibility. In addition to being harmful, the texts show a different side of him than the one he has shown the world. The contradiction that appeared to set off Did's rage, most was his repeated denials in public that he had ever been physically abusive. "I have never physically abused someone," he said in a January statement, yet one of his texts made explicit reference to what transpired last night and expressed regret for going out of control. Sent the morning following an event Cassie had testified about, his public assertion that their split was a thoughtful and respectful decision seemed particularly flimsy in light of texts he sent threatening to take action if she spoke up. When he reminded her that her silence had been bought with money, his carefully constructed persona as a respectable ex-partner fell apart. The most detrimental aspect was perhaps because these texts went against his claim that he had always encouraged Cassie's independence and profession. Private messages showed ongoing observation, interrogation of her conversation partners, and reminders that he created her and could destroy her with equal ease. During these disclosures, Cassie sat in the courtroom, staring straight ahead. She didn't even glance at Diddy when his tirade interrupted the event. As each discrepancy between his private and public communications grew more apparent, her lawyer silently supported her by lightly touching her arm. Her attendance at the time of these disclosures strengthened the prosecution's case even more.
This violence captured on cameras at a Los Angeles hotel ensued. You can see Combs kicking and dragging her. But the defense said Ventura's participation in the freak-offs was at times her idea, showing a text message from days earlier that said, "Baby, I want to FO so bad." "You proposed a freak-off," a defense attorney said. "You kept asking him." Combs' lawyers revealed he overdosed on painkillers in 2012, asking Ventura, "Were the worst years associated in any way with his drug use?" "Yeah, I would say." The defense hoping to convince the jury Combs became violent not to coerce Ventura into sex, but because he was an addict. They argue he may have been abusive, but that he's not guilty of sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And then I think things might have just spiraled out of control. And at the end, do I think that she wanted to do those things? No.
No, I don't think she wanted to do it at the end.
But
she
it
could
does
be more explicit about it.
True.
I wish there was a paper trail of her being more, because then he'd be cooked.
Yes, I agree with that. And these texts don't look good because it does make it look like she was into the freak-offs and all the freaky stuff.
Cassie remained composed from the minute she entered that morning and sat in the front row behind the prosecution table as Diddy was losing it. She wore minimal makeup, a black pantsuit, and her hair tied back. She waited in silence before the texts were made public, talking to her lawyers and occasionally scribbling notes on a little pad. She appeared ready for another typical court appearance, but that all changed when the prosecution revealed they had the text messages. Cassie's stance instantly became rigid. She sat up straighter, her shoulders taut as the screen displayed a few texts. She maintained a neutral demeanor, but her gaze was fixed on the screen. Not even during Diddy's rage did she glance at him. When a courtroom reporter saw the threatening texts, Cassie's breathing changed, as if she had deliberately chosen to act as though he wasn't even present. One especially unpleasant message caused her to take several deep breaths and close her eyes for a moment. The passage in which Diddy wrote, "You should be." Her expression of fear caused Cassie's hand to quiver a little as she reached for a glass of water. You could see her reliving those moments. Reporters later reported that one trial witness said her expression conveyed exactly what those texts meant to her. She had experienced genuine anxiety rather than only words on a screen. Her legal team was always on the lookout for she was seated next to her lead lawyer, who would occasionally put an encouraging hand on her arm or speak in her ear. The most frightening messages on the screen were surreptitiously passed to her by another member of her legal team. They had obviously readied her for this moment, yet being present at the time still had an emotional cost. The courtroom's physical layout emphasized the conflict between the ex-couple. At least 30 feet separated Cassie and Diddy, who were seated on opposite sides of the room. Court officials placed themselves in a strategic buffer zone. A discreet but obvious security measure was the presence of one officer standing right in the sightline between them. Cassie never glanced in Diddy's direction during the whole disclosure. Her demeanor was unaltered, except for a tiny tightness as she stared straight ahead during his scream. Her conscious refusal to make eye contact revealed a lot about their relationship. Upon seeing the wording regarding the repercussions of breaking her silence, Cassie closed her eyes for a while and inhaled deeply. Her lawyer then leaned over and muttered something that caused her to nod slightly. This was the one time she seemed on the verge of losing it, but she soon recovered her composure. The courtroom's main concern was whether Cassie would now be asked to testify on these particular messages. The prosecution had reportedly been delaying placing her on trial. Until these writings were added, the stand one could feel the excitement. Would she have to describe these conversations in her own words? The judge appeared to be impacted by the intense emotion in the room. After the last text was shown, he called for a 20-minute break to acknowledge the sensitive nature of the evidence. Cassie finally gave herself permission to show emotion as she got up to leave. She shed a single tear, which she promptly wiped away before squaring her shoulders and leaving with her legal team.
You know, they have their notebooks in their hand, they're coming in, they're very alert, and I think this is one of those testimonies where you have no choice but to pay attention and almost be flabbergasted, obviously, at some of what you're hearing, because it's not only just insight into somebody's sex life, but the details are disturbing at times, especially during that prosecution testimony when we saw some of the alleged abuse, or we saw pictures of her after a beating of some kind, according to her. But the jurors are definitely paying attention. I don't see anyone that's not keeping their focus on Cassie Ventura, and also I noticed them taking notes a lot of times.
And the children, as they were exiting court yesterday, 2 of the girls were seen crying. How emotional have they been in court?
Again, I cannot imagine if that was my father or somebody close to me up there and having to hear details of their sex life. Those are young women. They lost their mother, one of them, the twins. So no one can probably quite understand what it is that they're going through, but I think that's something that you think about on both sides, you know, to look at Alex Fine, which is Cassie Ventura's husband, and think about him having to listen to all that's being said about the type of woman that Cassie Ventura was versus the person that's expecting, you know, their 3rd child together now. So whether it's Combs's family or Ventura's family that's there to support her, her brother and her husband, Alex Fine, I think it's difficult on both sides. Seen him taking notes from the beginning. I see him put his glasses on. He gets very close to the screen when they're reading some of those text messages. So he's paying attention.
Now, Ventura confirmed that she and Combs had conversations about a swingers lifestyle, but that the freak-offs, they were very different.
Yeah, so she talked about this idea where I guess Combs wanted her to watch him have sex with another woman. She said that happened 2 or 3 times, but that he mentioned it frequently.
Kim Porter came up today in testimony. What was the significance there?
The defense said early on that this case would be about infidelity, love, and jealousy. And this is where they brought that up today when they brought up Kim Porter's name. The defense asked Cassie Ventura, are you jealous or were you jealous of Kim Porter? And Ventura sort of contemplated, but did get to this moment where she said, knowing that Combs spent holidays with his family, which meant with Porter, did bother her. And she admitted that. They also pointed out that there was testimony where she talked about being insanely jealous overall as a girlfriend. So, yeah.
We're hearing the judge wants Cassie off the stand tomorrow. Will the prosecution and defense get equal time?
Yeah, as long as there aren't any additional motions, I think that is the goal, to have her off the stand by tomorrow.
Why do you think that? What's the reasoning behind wanting her off the stand tomorrow?
In the very beginning, Rachel, they told us that she would likely be on that stand 2 to 3 days. So here we are.
Ever since the trial began, Judge Howard Richter has been in charge of a tight ship. Known for his straightforward style, he had prevented grandstanding and restricted media access in the courtroom while keeping both legal teams under strict control. When Diddy got up and attempted to approach the bench, Judge Richter's response was prompt. He banged his gavel and yelled, "Mr. Combs, return to your seat immediately." He had been especially strict about decorum, making it clear that despite Diddy's celebrity status, his courtroom wasn't a concert venue or press conference. As Diddy proceeded, the judge's tone became even more abrasive. Court officers, please make sure the defendant stays seated. This courtroom will be in order. Several court regulations were broken by Diddy's actions. It was against basic courtroom. Practice to stand up without authorization, try to approach the bench without being called, and make threatening gestures. Each of these behaviors may give rise to accusations of contempt of court, which carries penalties, including jail time. The court officials made a snap decision. When Diddy got to his feet, 2 of them approached him and positioned themselves between him and the official. Near the gallery, a 3rd cop showed up, obviously worried that things would get worse. because of their prompt action, what could have been an even more significant interference. To be clear, Judge RTOR did not hold back Mr. Combs after the 15-minute break. He stated, "Any further disruptions of this nature will result in you being held in contempt of court." This is not a negotiable subject. The judge then consulted Diddy's chief legal advisor. There will be repercussions for both of you if you are unable to maintain control over your customer. A formal warning that would be recorded in the court file was also given by the judge. For the record, it is unacceptable that the defendant disregards court processes in this way. If I have one more tantrum, I will be forced to think about filing a contempt case. What most individuals are unaware of how this occurrence fundamentally altered the judge's trial strategy. Prior to Diddy's tirade, Judge Richter had rendered decisions that were generally fair, occasionally granting the defense's arguments. Following the incident, evidence. Additionally, the judge made the uncommon decision to give the jury direct instructions regarding the incident. The defendant's actions during the proceedings are to be disregarded. The evidence that has been provided must be the only basis for your decision. Any emotional outbursts in this courtroom must be avoided. This lesson was essential since studies revealed jurors are frequently swayed by a defendant's actions in court, even when they are instructed to disregard them. The trial's legal experts said that judges have a great deal of discretion and that Diddy's outburst probably hurt his reputation with the court. When a defendant exhibits an inability to control themselves, judges often enforce stricter rules. As one legal observer put it, Judge Richter was already strict, and now he'll be keeping a close eye on Diddy. Now that these incendiary text conversations are in the record, and the judge is obviously annoyed by Diddy's actions, the trial's entire course has changed. Diddy's team's strong denial of the accusations has given way to a last-ditch effort. To limit the harm caused by his own words and deeds, the query at hand isn't simply about winning the case. It concerns how much worse things could get. What began as merely another high-profile legal dispute has escalated into a situation that could potentially ruin Diddy's career. These texts reveal Diddy's true identity, someone who intimidated and dominated his ex-girlfriend in private, not the slick-talking music mogul. Legal analysts question if Diddy's team will try to reach a settlement as Day 5 begins tomorrow. Damage control has already started, so why risk further secrets being revealed when certain things cannot be explained away? It's not really a matter of whether Diddy will prevail in this case.